Hello, everybody. This is Joe Joseph, and this is the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief. Man, there's some great stuff that came out today. First one by the Ron Paul Institute. This was highlighted by the DailySheeple.com. And it just goes to show you how much people don't know as far as the difference between defense spending and military spending. Because they're two totally separate things and two different line items. One's a budgetary line item, one's not. Very interesting. Anyway, the Ron Paul Institute had a great piece on this, and they say in a disturbing indication on how difficult it would be to bring military spending in line with actual threats overseas, House Armed Services Chairman Representative Mac Thornberry of Texas told President Obama last week that his war funding request of $11.6 billion for the rest of the year was far too low. That figure for the last 2 months of 2016 is larger than Spain's budget for the entire year, by the way. And this is just war fighting. It's actually like a supplement. It's not actual defense spending at all. More U.S. troops are being sent to Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, and the supplemental request is a way to pay for them without falling afoul of the sequestration limits. Because remember, folks, there's always a workaround. Just remember that. In government, there is always a workaround, just like in business. Most times there's a workaround. When a new regulation comes out, well, they just find a way to skirt it. The question is whether this increase in U.S. military activity and spending overseas actually keeps us safer, or whether it simply keeps the deep state and the military-industrial complex alive and well-funded. Because really, at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. Now, unfortunately, many Americans confuse defense spending with military spending. The two terms are used almost interchangeably, but there is a huge difference. Ron Paul always said that he would cut anything, or he wouldn't cut anything from the defense budget, because we do need a robust defense to keep the United States protected, because there are people, or there are powers out there that would take advantage of a country like ours with resources like ours if we didn't have a robust defense. But a defense is exactly that, folks. A defense is to defend. It's not an offense. You know, it was years ago that Edward Bernays suggested that we change what we call the Department of War because it was too overt. It was too pushy, if you will. The Department of War, meaning that was their job, to wage war. No, they had to change it to the Department of Defense because from a messaging standpoint or a positioning standpoint, defense, it's docile. It sits dormant until it's needed. That kind of thing. It puts that message, that vision in your head, in your mind, to make it seem less than it actually is. And that's how they've gotten away with increased defense spending. You know, President Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. I mean, here he was, an accomplished general during World War II, the president of the United States. He said it himself. If we're not careful, man, the military-industrial complex is going to run away. It's going to run away with things, and it certainly has. It certainly has. Now, to get the military, Ron Paul says, in line with our real defense needs, it would require a focus on actual interests and a dramatic decrease in spending. The spending follows the policy, and the policy right now reflects the neocon and media propaganda that we must run the rest of the world or there'll be total chaos, which we know that that's not the case. Take a look at Spain. What a great example Spain was. Spain, they had elections, and they couldn't agree on a government. Right now, they're over 6 months operating without a government, and they have seen growth now for the first time in years. Their unemployment is plummeting. Why? Oh, because, and everybody said, hey, no, if you don't get this government in, there's going to be chaos. And guess what happened? The exact opposite. No, and I'm not advocating for no government, but I'll tell you what, no government's better than a government run amok. That's for damn sure. So he says, do we really need to continue spending hundreds of billions of dollars manipulating elections overseas or destabilizing governments that don't do as Washington tells them, or even the Western banks? Let's add them in there too. Rewarding those who follow Washington's orders with massive aid and weapon sales? Do we need to continue the endless wars in Afghanistan, even as we discover that Saudi Arabia had more to do with 9/11 than the Taliban we've been fighting for a decade and a half? Do we really need 800 U.S. military bases in more than 70 countries overseas? Do we need to continue to serve as the military protection force for our wealthy NATO partners, even though they're more than capable of defending themselves? Do we need our CIA to continue to provoke revolutions like in the Ukraine and armed insurgencies like in Syria? If the answer to these questions is yes, then I'm afraid we should prepare for an economic collapse in very short order. Then, with our economy in ruins, we'll face the wrath of those countries overseas which have been in the crosshairs of our interventionist foreign policy. If the answer is no, then we have to work to conceive or convince our countrymen to reject the idea of empire and embrace the United States as a constitutional republic that no longer goes abroad seeking monsters to slay. In the end, Ron Paul says, the choice is ours. And he's absolutely right. We have the choice. And it's whether or not the American people plug in and do what they need to do by applying pressure to their non-representing representatives, and even go so far as to boycott all of these mega corporations and all of these corporations that people like George Soros and these multi-billionaires like the Koch brothers and even the Waltons, for example. I mean, what a scam Walmart is. And I mean, everybody relies on Walmart. But I'm saying, if we could just apply pressure by not participating and not consenting to these outlandish policies that have gone on for far too long, we could really turn this country around. We really could. And the EU, according to Activist Post's Daisy Luther, they're convening panic meetings because Trump could possibly stop funding 73% of NATO. Think about that for a second. 73% of NATO is funded by the United States. What are we getting for our money? It doesn't matter what figurehead's in office. It's foolish. It's foolish. Just as Ron Paul said, let's see what Daisy Luther has to say. She says Angela Merkel and nearly every other national leader in Europe are in panic because of Trump's unexpected win in the presidential election. Why? Well, because money. The U.S. money that props up NATO may be coming to an end. During his election campaign, President-elect Trump described NATO as obsolete. He says NATO is something that at the time was excellent. Today, it has to be changed. It has to be changed to include terror. It has to be changed from the standpoint of cost because the United States bears far too much of the cost of NATO. That according to President-elect Donald Trump. So 73% of NATO defense expenditures come from the United States. That's something that President-elect Trump says that he intends to reduce, which would further force others to put more into the communal money pot and, if they want America to continue its participation. And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned President-elect Trump that going it alone isn't a good idea for either the U.S. or the EU. This is what he had to say. Quote, the only time NATO has invoked its self-defense clause, that an attack on one is an attack on all, was in support of the United States after the 9/11 attacks. This was more than just a symbol. Hundreds of thousands of European soldiers have served in Afghanistan since, and more than 1,000 have paid the ultimate price in an operation that is in a direct response to an attack against the United States. Today of all days, we remember them. It is all too easy to take the freedoms, security, and prosperity we enjoy for granted. In these uncertain times, we need strong American leadership, and we need Europeans to shoulder their fair share of the burden. But above all, we need to recognize the value of the partnership between Europe and America. It remains indispensable. Let me stop there. Does it really? Does it really? And here's the thing, Thomas Jefferson, I believe, said it best when he said, trade with all, ally with none. Those are it's very good advice. As we've seen over time, alliances often get you into a lot of trouble, as it has for the Europeans. Look, here goes 9/11, clearly a false flag. I don't care what anybody says. And they get dragged into it because the United States invoked the self-defense clause. Now, mind you, the United States bears much of the burden when it comes to the budget for NATO, but what are we paying for? What are we getting in return? And all we seem to be doing is fueling the military-industrial complex on both sides of the fence. You know, when's it going to stop? Jean-Claude Juncker said this. He said, I think that we'll waste time for 2 years while Mr. Trump tours a world that he's completely unaware of. Let me stop there. No, he's not. Mr. Trump, if he does it right, and this is the thing, this is what's going to have to play out, and we're going to have to be very vigilant and watch, because there's some things that Donald Trump has already kind of reneged on, and that's like, for example, prosecuting Hillary Clinton. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you at this point? Man, I'd make a big stink out of it. I would have circus tents on the National Mall. It'd be like a carnival atmosphere. Are you kidding me? I mean, this would be like huge, almost like the Nuremberg trials. It'd be on every channel on TV. I mean, this would be huge news. It would be a huge event, you know? This is what we have to do to really make things right. We have to reestablish justice. And the only way to do that is to set a standard. And the only way to set the standard is to hold these people accountable. How else are we going to do it? Juncker continued, he says, the transatlantic alliance and the NATO alliance is called into question. So it would be quite pernicious. With regards to refugees and other non-Americans, Trump has an approach which in no way coincides with the approach in Europe. Of course, Juncker was speaking at a crisis meeting that had been arranged very soon after Trump won the election. But really, who is it a crisis for? Daisy continues, she says, it has never crossed the consciousness of any of these people that they've messed up, and that they've messed up big time. You know, they listened to Angela Merkel, who seemed to be the self-proclaimed ruler of Europe, and now look what they're paying the price. Their infrastructure's crumbling, the crime rates are exploding. You've got the migrant crisis going on, all because of what these globalists have put into place. Think about that. Nigel Farage spent a couple of hours in a private meeting with Trump on Saturday. And if you remember, he was the one that engineered the Brexit movement. And most of the Brits who voted to exit the EU were pulling for Trump in the election. Says, don't underestimate this guy, Farage said on Squawk Box. He made a big success of his business career, and he intends to be a successful president. And I think he may well be. Now, Trump's surprise victory has often been compared to the poll-defying June vote for the British citizens of the UK to leave the European Union trading bloc. Now, what Trump believes in, and as Nigel Farage says he believes in, is nation-state democracy, that we should be controlling our own borders, making our own laws, and yes, trading with each other, cooperating with each other, being good neighbors. Seems to be good policy to me. But the powers that shouldn't be are still in a tizzy, you see. And they're not going to let this go easy. Or, I'll float this out too. It could very well be an act. It could very well be something that plays out in the media and all of this with regards to, could this be an act to show that maybe they don't want us to think that Trump's their guy? I don't know. We have to see how this plays out. SHTFplan.com has a great piece. Still not over. 2 electors launch an effort to flip the Electoral College and block a Trump win. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. But technically, believe it or not, the selection hasn't taken place yet. This is SHTFplan.com. It says presidential electors of the mystified Electoral College must still actually vote for the president, and there isn't anything keeping them from voting their conscience and choosing someone other than Trump. I mean, they could vote for Betty Crocker for all they care. It doesn't matter. Moreover, it appears that there's an active effort to flip the Electoral College to deny Trump the presidency and toss the White House to either Hillary or a GOP loyalist. The Never Trump crowd and plenty of bitter Hillary supporters are still hoping for a coup, though even they admit it's a long shot. It's completely unprecedented and anything but likely. See, the speculation is that if this maneuver were to be successful, the GOP-led Congress could be persuaded not to choose Hillary, but to write in a selection for the party loyalists, like perhaps a Mitt Romney or a John Kasich, or even a Bush, perhaps. Now, of course, there have been reports that Team Hillary has been hard at work attempting to persuade electors to switch their votes in the hope, however desperate, that they can still flip the election to take the White House. But the larger issue here isn't that the system is badly broken, even though it is. Well, it is badly broken, let's be honest. The people are harshly divided along demographic and political lines, and the future is gambling on extreme versions of itself. Larger-than-life candidates, and a bizarre backdoor maneuver in an attempt to hack the system and bend it in one direction or the other. See, because Trump has taken his place on the stage in a thunderous revolt of the people, because people are pissed, people want accountability, and they're not seeing it. And so what they did is they gave us two really crap candidates in the grand scheme of things. And either way, like I said, the powers that shouldn't be are going to have a victory. Why? It's simple. Because Hillary got in, the globalist thing continues. The globalist train keeps a chugging on. Trump gets in. Now, my friends, now you have a excuse, a scapegoat to be able to crash the system and blame it all on Trump because of his policies. Look at him. This guy went and changed everything, and look what happened. Even though the stage has been set for a very long time. And if you speak out about it, especially on social media or other platforms, why, you get censored. ZeroHedge.com has a great piece. It says online freedom plunges for a sixth straight year as social media censorship grows. We've all seen it. We're all privy to it. Everybody that's on Facebook has gone to Facebook jail at least once in their life, right? It says internet freedom has declined for the sixth straight consecutive year, and with more governments than ever before targeting social media and communications apps as a mean of halting the rapid dissemination of information, particularly during anti-government protests. According to the latest Freedom of the Net reports, 2/3 of internet users live in countries where criticism of the government, military, or ruling family are subject to censorship. Let me stop there. And they do this in different ways. Like on YouTube, they call it community guidelines. And in their community guidelines, and especially if you decide that you want to monetize your channel, right? Because your content is yours and you want to capitalize on it, much like any media company would or any personality would that's in Hollywood or otherwise. And so you go and monetize your channel. Well, what they'll do is they hold your monetization over your head and they say, well, you have to have advertiser-friendly content. And to do so, put fuzzy kittens up there. Because if you talk about a Clinton or a hot button issue, why, we're going to pull it because that would make advertisers really uncomfortable. And we don't want to do that. And this is happening all over the world. Of course, you have varying levels of censorship. And just like here in the United States, they may not call it overt censorship. They call it different things like violating community guidelines, or Facebook policy. And then they put their algorithms to work. Remember, Google's big on this. Facebook's big on this. They've got the giant computers that can run these complex algorithms that can automatically censor things. It's not like you have these administrators that are there 24/7 monitoring content anymore. It's not the platforms that were back in the day, when YouTube was basically put it out and it got out to everybody, all your subscribers at once. Now YouTube will go ahead and only send it out to a few subscribers here and there, maybe. And then they limit your view counts and they do stupid things to limit the message. It may be getting out to anybody, but when you see a view counter that's on the low side, right, you tend not to watch it. You may think it's just not as good. It's not viral because people want to see viral content because that's what they do. Most people are followers. Most people are sheep. And so what we have to do is overcome that. And how do we do it? You get more people out there starting blogs, starting social media sites, and let's flood the internet. Let's not participate. Let's not consent to the censorship. And then, my friends, and only then, will we truly have change. This is Joe Joseph. This has been your dailysheeple.com news shot. I'll have one again for you tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.